5 of us that are also around here, and it used to be tradition that your predecessor got the
I'm a Minnesotan, so I believe in politeness.
So I asked you, I was also the first grade kid with my hand up.
Yeah. Oh, you were that way. I was the one in the back of the class. In fact, can I just start with, this is actually the coolest thing about the day for me so far. When I was in 4th grade, I went to a new school, and anybody that remembers going to a new school in 4th grade, it's not easy, and I was not happy, and I walked up to the steps of my new school in Hopkins, Minnesota, and a young guy greets me, got white hair, says, "My name is Donald Eldridge Jackson IV, and what's your name?" I said, "I'm Dean." And he said, "Well, welcome to school. We're in the same class, and let me show you around." And he has been my best friend for my whole life. He is a Republican. He voted for Donald Trump, and I love him. And he's here with his family to celebrate this today. And if I could just start with explaining why I'm doing this, it's that. It's that you can support the other person. You can be a D or an R or red or blue. You can be on opposing sides of issues. But if someone doesn't stop this nonsense, and someone doesn't celebrate relationships like I have with my dear friend Dee, who I love as much as anybody in this world, then we're in trouble. And it's not too late. And that's why I'm doing this. And I just ask and encourage all of those who feel the same, the exhausted majority, to give that a little thought. Because if you're a real patriot, if you really love this country, that's how we act. And I'm afraid that we have taken a different position, encouraged by some of the very people with whom I work, by an angertainment industry that is trying to divide us, and by a culture of conflict that can be resolved if we do it in the way that our founders intended. And I would just lastly say that George Washington's farewell address is something I read regularly because I think he anticipated literally this very day. Factions, parties that care so much more about political preservation than people, about regionalism, if you will, people in different geographies in this country either feeling disenfranchised or fighting, and then foreign threats and influence. Those are the 3 things that over 200 years ago our first president cautioned us, warned us about, and here we are with digital media and phones in our hands, in an entirely different world that he never could have imagined, power, prestige, wealth that no country has ever achieved, and he would be disappointed in us. And I just invite and encourage all of us, no matter your politics, I love you all. America loves one another, and that's how I want to begin this. And I just want to thank you once again for doing what you do, covering us and uncovering us, like I just said outside, because that's what George Washington knew we needed, and that's what the next president of the United States knows we need, and that's how I will do it. So thank you.
What is the real reason, the one key reason that you have decided to jump in, and at this hour you feel you're at a disadvantage coming in a little late?
Oh, I'm the underdog, I'm the long shot, I'm at a massive disadvantage, and that's why I love our country. Yeah. When I think of long shots, I remember being with my squirt hockey team in Minnesota at a hockey tournament in Alexandria, Minnesota. We were sitting in front of an old Curtis Mathis TV at the Radisson Hotel, my whole team, watching the American Olympic hockey team play the Russians. We had no chance. That was during the Cold War. It had much more meaning to this country and to the world than just a hockey game. And we watched, glued to that TV, the whole game and saw America beat the Soviets in hockey. And that's a long shot. Going to the moon is a long shot. Americans did it first. Flying for the first time, the Wright brothers, that's a long shot. This is the country of long shots. Well, and that's why, let me just finish this, because that's why politics is so messed up right now. That's why people are so upset. We have these institutionalists that believe somehow they know better. And I don't know what is so frightening about competition, about choices, about freedom. I'm doing what our founders wanted people to do, which is to participate. And I would ask that people give a little thought to why we do that. And that's why I'm doing it.
But really, your predecessor, Senator Eugene McCarthy,
yes,
forced a sitting president out of office by campaigning against what he viewed as an immoral war. 538 says you vote with Joe Biden 100% of the time. So What is your message in this race other than he's old and I'm not?
Well, my message isn't age. By the way, both candidates would be the oldest American presidents in our history. Both candidates would be well into their 80s in their next term. I work with 80-year-olds who are plenty competent and plenty sharp. Nancy Pelosi, I think, was the most extraordinary wielder of power I've ever served with in any capacity in my entire life, and that is the case. I'm here to celebrate the president. This might surprise many of you. I admire President Biden. I think he saved our country 4 years ago. At that time, he was the only one that could have done so. And how did we determine that? Because there was a primary. And I believe it is important, integral, and the most, I think it is existential for the longest living democracy in world history, the United States, to do the same thing every 4 years. And I do not have anything but admiration for the president. Yes, I voted for his policies. I'm a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat. And I helped market his policies, serving on the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. I helped package them and distribute them and call attention to them. And I'm not going to shy away from that because they're good policies. But on that subject, Americans are struggling. President Biden has served for 50 years in Washington. I think I was 3 years old when he became a United States Senator. He's a good man, and he's been working there for 50 years. I've been at this for 5 years, but before that, I chaired a board of a hospital system, health system. I served on the board of a university, traveled the world in business, been to 49 of 50 states. And because I was in sales, I was taught by my great-grandfather that in sales you listen. You don't sell first, you listen. And then, based on what people tell you, you offer what they need. And that's what I intend to do, and I've been doing it. And what I'm hearing is people are struggling immensely. They are seeing groceries and fuel, their mortgages skyrocket now. And we have passed very important policies, but it is not nearly enough. And all the time that members of Congress and in Washington spend fighting each other is time that we're not spending fighting for people. And if someone objects to that, it's a free country. If someone objects to having choices, it's a free country. If someone objects to freedom, it's a free country. If someone objects to me, it's a free country.
So does that mean that you think that Joe Biden hasn't listened to people, isn't listening to people sufficiently?
I think President Biden, having spent time with him, my daughters, who are behind me, were in their early teens when the president actually came to my home for an event. He spent time with my daughters on the couch answering every question. Remember that? Mm-hmm. On note cards. And then when it came time for the president to speak, it was my job to introduce him. We couldn't find him in my own home. So we look around. The Secret Service was a little concerned. And I went into our garage and I found the then vice president sitting on a card chair eating ice cream with the catering staff. He is a man of extraordinary empathy. The tragedy that he endured in his late 20s when he lost his wife and daughter is something that nobody would ever want to go through. That is not, he's a good man. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I'm listening to people all around the country saying they want a change. They want a new generation. That it's time to go to the future. And the problems and the challenges that we're facing are so clearly ones that can only be addressed. By the way, not just my generation, I'm talking about younger generations. I want to be the first president that employs AI to reduce costs for Americans, to embed it into the federal government and use it to produce better outcomes, to create more efficiencies, and deliver better service to Americans. We invented this. It is United States technology. We have people waiting to do so, but we do not have people in positions of power who understand it, who understand this could be the most transformative, positive transformation in American history. Also cognizant of the risks. There are differences. Not because he's not a good man, because I'm part of a different generation that is looking ahead, and I will make that case, but most of all, I want to talk about people. People are really struggling, and they need to be heard, and there are actionable ways, actionable ways to reduce costs for people. Healthcare is the most burdensome challenge for so many Americans. We are the only country that does it like this. We spend twice as much as any nation in the world. The people who actually make their medicines, use taxpayer dollars sometimes to do the research on them, charge us 3, 4, 5 times more than any other people in the entire world. We can reduce those costs. Why are corporations being afforded tax benefits that hardworking Americans aren't. I come from a state of Minnesota that I took it for granted, talking about Eugene McCarthy. Minnesota doesn't tax clothing and food because we know those are actionable ways to actually help people who are really struggling with their necessities. I want to afford the same benefits to hardworking Americans that we give to the well-off, like myself, by the way, and to corporations. We can reduce healthcare costs. Why is childcare so expensive? Why doesn't the federal government not recognize that people can't work if they have to pay more than their earnings to have their kids looked after? So what do? They stay home. And we have an economy now that is desperate for a labor force. We have chaos at the border that I think Democrats are somehow afraid to address because they feel they might lose their seats if they do what the country needs, which is security at the border and a more thoughtful, humane policy.
But here in New Hampshire, just this week, Democrats complained about Republicans talking about the border. The chairman of the state party says that it's thinly veiled racism to talk about the border problem. And so in that climate, you're going to make border security part of your message to New Hampshire Democrats?
I'm going to make national security part of my platform because that is the fundamental responsibility of the American president. And right now, having been to the southern border twice, it is not secure, it is inhumane, it is not fair to those who are seeking refuge, it is not fair to our Border Patrol agents who have shown extraordinary mercy and humanity in ways that I wish more Americans saw. And they've been demeaned by Democrats. So we can be adjudicating asylum cases in countries of origin. I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee. We allocate billions and billions of dollars to countries around the world. We're not using it effectively. It's wasted. It fuels corruption in a lot of places. Why do we not invest in the very countries from which migrants are coming because they're persecuted, feel unsafe, or have no opportunity? Why don't we use American resources upstream to invest in those countries so that people have a safe place, they have opportunity, they have shelter, and do not need to pour across our border? I've seen young women carrying babies across the Rio Grande, and I've seen how American Border Patrol agents embrace them. I have seen babies who are unaccompanied in strollers, in facilities, who are cared for by American Border Patrol agents. So for Democrats, for someone to accuse those who care about border security as being racist, I think those people are actually being inhumane. And I think we can do better. And by the way, we also have to reform our immigration policy. I am maybe one of the only ones in Congress as the most bipartisan, or now I think second. Got to talk to Susie Lee, who I think beat me and now is number one. But I'm the second most bipartisan member of the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate, and every governor. And I vote mostly with my Democratic colleagues. But it goes to show who I am and how I do things. Two things not only can be true at once, they usually are true at once. We need border security and we need immigration reform. It's humane and it's the economic choice. Every issue, from gun violence prevention to reproductive rights, to any policy of substance and need right now, every one of them, two things are true at once. And it saddens me that I'm among the only ones willing to say that out loud, the only ones who has affection for my Republican colleagues as much as I do for my Democratic colleagues. And I want to do this better. And I'm asking Americans to give thought to whether you want to see it better, and if you want to make that choice, to see if we can do this differently, not with someone who's been doing this for decades, not from people who want to protect their careers rather than participate when we need them, but from someone who cares so deeply about a country that has given him, his family, his foremothers and forefathers, more than anybody could possibly imagine, and also a country that sent my own father to Vietnam and died defending our freedoms. So I'm not going to sit still. I was 6 months old. And one more thing, it's important. The same chamber in which I serve now, and the same people with the same voting rights that are afforded me as representatives, afforded my father, Artie Peffer, the resources to go to college because he had no money. He grew up poor in St. Paul. My grandfather died when he was a little boy. So he took an ROTC scholarship, went to law school, graduated from the University of Minnesota. My mom is right here, an amazing woman who is my hero. And then the same people in that same room who afforded him education sent him to war, ostensibly defending our freedoms, right? And he died there. And I love my country because we're the country that gave him education. And I want to do this to remind Americans about how precious we are, how we have to take into account where we send our young men and women to defend our freedoms, and the consequence of the very decisions that we make in that chamber. And I'm afraid in politics in America right now, the disconnect between Washington and those rooms and what people are feeling is graphic and it's grotesque and it's got to change.
Congressman,
Yes, sir.
you
Paul.
made the deadline here.
Barely.
Barely, but you did. You didn't make it in Nevada.
I'm told that, yeah.
Yes, you got one coming up in South Carolina. Will you be filing there? Plus, if this, I know you're aiming to win the nomination. If it doesn't work out, will you back and endorse the eventually Democratic nominee?
Let me start with that. Absolutely. I've expressed my admiration for the president. I think it is imperative for the United States, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, if you care about democracy, if you care about freedom, I think it's terribly important that a Democrat win this election. And I will do anything, I will give everything I have, every moment of my time, every ounce of my energy to ensure that that nominee, whether it be me, of course, President Biden, or somebody else, becomes president. I think it is that existential. So the answer is yes.
So you wouldn't support an organization like No Labels?
I've made it clear. I've made it clear to No Labels. I want to be clear about them too. The political industrial complex takes sides very quickly. They paint a picture of every organization as either good or bad, and the truth is usually in the middle, as it is with No Labels. I have seen No Labels do the one thing that Congress needs more than anything else: push Democrats and Republicans together. They push us together. They forced us to work with the Senate and a similar group in the Senate. Now, by the way, the Problem Solvers Caucus and No Labels are not affiliated. We are a caucus supported by people who want to see Democrats and Republicans work together. I have spoken with the leadership of No Labels. I've made my intentions clear. I will not support any third-party entry this year. Cornel West, Robert Kennedy, a No Labels effort, anything that might undermine whoever the Democratic nominee might be, I do not favor. They have made it very clear to me, right to my face, that they are on exactly the same page. And they will do nothing to help Donald Trump win again. They will do just the opposite. I believe them. Of course, you got to walk the talk, and I believe they will. But I feel very strongly about that, and I will not run as a third party. I will not support a third party. I will support whoever it is, because I do think the man, not his supporters, but the man, is an existential threat to the United States more so than any foreign threat. And by the way, we spend $1 trillion defending ourselves against those. We should wake up and use our votes to defend America against him.
Congressman, what have you heard from your Democratic
So
colleagues?
just on the money in politics and what you're talking about with the political industrial complex, in June 2019, Harlan Crow gave you a maximum donation of $2,800 in your primary. Could you explain the backstory there and what the relationship with Harlan Crow is, or how you approach big money in general?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you exactly. I don't believe I've ever met Harlan Crow. Someone mentioned recently that he contributed to my campaign. I think I've had thousands and thousands of people contribute, so I won't opine on him. I take campaign finance reform really seriously. In fact, the only member of Congress, the only one who takes no PAC money, no lobbyist money, who takes no money from my fellow members of Congress and will not give them any money, and who has no leadership PAC, is sitting at this table right now. The only one. Money in politics is destroying the country. I used to be on the other side as a donor. It was appalling, disgusting, corrupt, miserable. My colleagues have to spend 10,000 hours per week raising money. I want you to hear that number, 10,000 hours per week, dialing for dollars, hosting events. By the way, going to breakfasts, lunches, dinners, every waking moment. In fact, I have a bill. I've authored a bill that would prevent fundraising in Washington between the morning hours and the evening hours, because when we're in Washington, we should be working, not raising money. That's a different story. But campaign finance reform is imperative. It's not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's grotesque. It's wrong. I believe that is the root of all political evil in this country right now. It's financing an entertainment industry, a political industrial complex that is grotesque. And most of all, when you're spending 10,000 hours per week raising money, you're raising it from people who have it. And why do we think most Americans are really sickened right now? Because no one is coming to them. No one is listening to them. No one is calling them. And that's why when I run, both in my congressional races and as I will be doing on my bus beginning today, I'm going to be calling at least $5 donors every single day to say thank you. Because let me assure you, that was a much bigger gesture about their passion for democracy than any $5,000 donor, any $50,000 donor, any $500,000 donor to super PACs and the like. So that's my position.
So are you saying just so I get it right, was the donation unsolicited, or was that on call time? For you, like, were you
First of all, I did call time in my first campaign because this sickening system forces us to raise, in my case, I think, $12 million or some crazy sickening number. By the way, who in their right mind in America right now would want to do this? What would our founders think? What would our founders think if we told them that to serve in the United States Congress, you'd have to sit on the phone all day long and call rich people and beg and plead for money and do it every day once you're elected, and then do it every 2 years? They would be appalled. I mean, appalled. So to answer your question, I do not remember ever making a call to Mr. Crow. If I did, by the way, and there's evidence of it, I will be the first to acknowledge it because I don't know him. And by the way, I think there's something in there too. I want to tell the truth. I will tell the truth. I will be honest. Sometimes I get it wrong. And when I do, it's a job of an American president, of a member of Congress, to say you got it wrong. Not to hide it, not to ignore it, and I don't know the answer to the question. And when I don't know the answer to the question, I'll tell you too.
I have one more specific New Hampshire
I want to make
question.
sure everybody, oh, sure. Oh, I like specific New Hampshire questions.
So, if you win this long shot and you become president, will you restore the New Hampshire primary to its place at the front of the Democratic calendar when it was taken away by Joe Biden?
Yes. I believe in tradition. I think that our entire country can and must learn from New Hampshire. I think it's the most civically engaged state in the entire country for this reason. There's a culture of participation. You have a history, a tradition, an imperative of assessing presidential candidates. Just one state, but it's the beginning state. And I believe in tradition. I'm a Democrat who believes in tradition. I think we should conserve our environment, our resources, and our traditions like this, especially when they have served the country generally pretty well. And I think that's, and by the way, I represent, I think, the most highly engaged district in the United States, the highest voter turnout, the highest census self-return rate, which is why, and by the way, you might know this, but when I woke up the morning after that 2016 election and my daughters were crying and I promised them I would do something, I ran against a embedded, entrenched Republican who had won by 14 points in 2016 in a district that had not been represented by a Democrat since the 1958 election. And I won. Not because I was the best Democrat. I won because I invited independents and Republicans to listen, to be listened to join me, to have conversation with me. You will see policy propositions that are not informed by polls or consultants, but by my common ground dinners in Minnesota, by my on-the-job with deans when I go to work at businesses and people actually get to talk to me. And when I'm president, I will not just restore the first in the nation primary, if the DNC is willing to work with me on that, but I would also make the White House, the people's house, legitimately. I would populate a cabinet with people who are the best and brightest, most able to actually manage our agencies, the people who care about customer service, the people who care about zero-based budgeting. No successful enterprise, by the way, would do what we do. Let's just take what we did last year and add a few percent. So we negotiate over how much we increase. We should be negotiating over what is important, resourcing it accordingly. I don't care if there's a D or R at the end of your name. If you're a principled person, a person of character, there'll be a place for you on my cabinet. We also have to change the cabinet. We need to engage youth. There should be a youth cabinet position. And I would also create a position of the common sense cabinet position. Someone whose sole responsibility is to identify ways to improve how we do things. Government is not business. It should not be operated like one. But the spirit of business, where you have competing ideas, competing perspectives, you have competition, by the way. That's what makes things better. And I will also, one more thing, I will use the White House grounds to include Americans, not just for black tie dinners for the wealthy and the well-connected. I will invite Americans who want to explore the White House and enjoy its culture and have music on the grounds. I will have common ground dinners in the White House. I will not appoint ambassadors based on how much they gave my campaign. To the contrary. How shameful that we're a country that encourages civic duty, that encourages public service. People join the Foreign Service. They work for decades to improve our image around the world, to increase the American image abroad, to solve the most difficult challenges as it relates to war and hunger. How do you think they feel when American presidents then identify their biggest donors and send them to the great ambassadorships of the world, leaving the other posts in the most difficult places and countries for our real public servants. These are the things, everybody, that are just so easy to fix. And I believe America wants that chance, and they want that change. And that's how I would do it.
In response
Guys,
to
this is going to be our last
in
question.
response to
Oh, darn,
Kevin's
I'd have to
question,
do this longer.
in response to Kevin's question, you invoked the miracle on ice. So I'm wondering, when you're maybe not when you're in front of cameras
Yeah.
with people, and you're home alone, and you think about the chances you have of unseating an incumbent president, do you actually think it will take a miracle to elect you president?
No. In fact, not at all. It takes people who want to preserve, protect, promote democracy. It takes people who are really sick and tired of this nonsense. And it just takes people doing the biggest responsibility, the most important obligation in a free country like ours, to just go vote. And, you know, I have to say, there's not much that Donald Trump represents that I liked. But I'll tell you, he got people to come out and vote. And I'm not saying that will be his only legacy, but I will be honest, I think there's something really important about someone who at least gets people who believe that they don't matter, that no one cares, that all is lost, to get out and actually exercise, by the way, and I mean this intentionally, exercise democracy, exercise their rights. The fact that this great country has such low turnout in primaries is appalling, and it's embarrassing, and it's really dangerous. So I'll answer your question. No, it doesn't take a miracle. It just takes a majority of people like me, I would call us the exhausted majority, to come out and vote. And by the way, if you're an independent, you're a Republican, give me a chance. You might be really surprised that if you give this a chance, you give this campaign, you see the kind of people that I would populate that cabinet with, when you see my relationships with my Republican colleagues, when you see how I conduct myself, both in my private and in my public life, when you see what is possible by simply objecting to the status quo, you'll see me say today, shortly, that it's time for us to declare independence again from this nauseating, disgusting, repulsive, and disenfranchising system that our founders, including some from this very state, would have been appalled by. And that is who I am, and that's why I would seek and ask and invite anybody who feels the same to reconsider their obligations politically and maybe consider their obligations to our country.
Congressman, on the ballot,
sir.
just briefly,
Yeah.
is it a mistake that Joe Biden isn't on the ballot here in New Hampshire, and does it play to your advantage that he isn't?
It's a question that's being asked a lot. That's a question he should be asked. I don't know the answer. I won't know how New Hampshire folks feel until I start today, and I'm going to be all around, and I'm going to hear how they feel, and I can't wait. It's disappointing because I believe in this tradition, but that's a question you'll have to ask him, and I guess the voters of New Hampshire. Not I guess, I know. If nothing else, I'm giving you the choice, and I'm giving you the freedom, and I'm giving you the opportunity to register how you feel about what has been done, not just as it relates to the primary, but what has been done to our country, and whether or not you're ready for change.
Thank you, Congressman.
I guess I got to go do something else. I went to Indian Fiber right on the
You're gonna go downstairs and put a pin on the wall and then go stake outside.
my
We can't wear that.
daughters and my sister went to the same company. My father went to the same company.
It's got to be an asshole.
I'm going to sneak through here if I can. Pardon me? Excuse me?
No kidding. Excuse me? We're almost married. Norwegian all the way.